Celeste Rivera's world spun like a broken carousel as consciousness slowly crept back into her foggy mind. The first thing she noticed was the silk, expensive, cool silk sheets that definitely didn't belong to her modest apartment. The second thing was the scent of expensive cologne lingering on the pillow beside her, masculine and intoxicating in a way that made her stomach flutter with both excitement and dread. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden shadows across what was clearly a luxury hotel suite. Celeste blinked hard, trying to piece together the fragments of the previous night, like a detective solving a crime she'd committed but couldn't remember. Her head pounded with the rhythm of a jazz drum, and her mouth felt like she'd been gargling. "Sand!" "Oh, God," she whispered, her voice hoarse and unfamiliar. She was wearing nothing but a man's white dress shirt, unbuttoned and hanging loosely around her shoulders. The fabric smelled like him, whoever he was, and sent shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Piecing together, the night memories flickered like old film reels. The farewell party at Morrison and Associates, the Icha advertising agency she'd just quit to pursue her dream job at Sterling Dynamics. She remembered the fifth mojito, Jessica Park's infectious laughter as they danced to salsa music, and then him. Tall, devastatingly handsome with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through her soul. She remembered his voice, smooth as aged whiskey, asking her to dance. "You move like you're painting stories in the air," he'd said, making her laugh despite herself. She'd been bold, reckless, pulling him closer as the music pulsed around them. The kiss came back to her in waves, passionate, desperate, like they were trying to communicate in a language only their bodies understood. She remembered strong hands, lifting her, gentle yet commanding, and the way he whispered her name like a prayer against her neck, but his name remained frustratingly blank. The Great Escape Celeste slid out of bed carefully, her bare feet touching cold marble floors. Her black cocktail dress lay crumpled near the sofa like evidence of her temporary insanity. She gathered her clothes with the stealth of a cat burglar, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and something else she didn't want to analyze too closely. "You're a professional, Celeste," she muttered under her breath, struggling into her dress. "Not some character in a romance novel." She found her purse by the door and pulled out her phone. 17 missed calls from Jessica and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. "Where did you go? Are you alive? Please tell me you didn't leave with that mysterious stranger." Celeste groaned. So it was confirmed. She had indeed left with a complete stranger and apparently had the night of her life. The evidence was written all over her body in the form of gentle marks on her neck and the tender ache in muscles she'd forgotten she had. Unable to leave without saying something, she grabbed a hotel notepad and scribbled a quick message. "Thank you for whatever this was. I hope you have a wonderful life. See." She hesitated, pen hovering over the paper. Part of her wanted to leave her number, wanted to see where this could lead. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had been burned by relationships before, reminded her that she was starting fresh tomorrow. New job, new life, no complications. Sterling Dynamics and new beginnings. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a marching band. Celeste stood in front of the gleaming Sterling Dynamics building, a 40-story glass monument to corporate success that scraped the Manhattan sky. She clutched her coffee like a lifeline, her navy blazer pressed to perfection, her dark hair pulled back in a sophisticated bun that she hoped screamed serious professional. "Today is about new beginnings," she whispered to herself, straightening her shoulders. "No thinking about mysterious hotel rooms or men who kiss like they're trying to steal your soul." The lobby buzzed with morning energy, expensive heels clicking. On marble floors, the aroma of premium coffee and the low hum of ambitious conversations. Celeste felt a thrill of excitement mixed with nerves. This was it, her shot at the big leagues. She was directed to the creative department on the 23rd D floor, where she met her new teammate, Jessica Park. Ironically, the same Jessica who'd been texting her frantically all weekend. "Celeste!" Jessica squealed, practically bouncing out of her chair. "I can't believe we're working together again, but more importantly, you disappeared Friday night with that gorgeous stranger and haven't answered a single call. Spill. Everything." Celeste's cheeks flamed. "Nothing to spill, just a mistake I'm pretending never happened." Jessica raised an eyebrow, but was interrupted by the office manager's announcement. "All staff to the main conference room for the new CEO introduction in 10 minutes. The impossible revelation." The conference room filled quickly, buzzing with speculation about their new leader. Celeste found a seat in the middle, far enough back to avoid attention, but close enough to appear engaged. She reviewed her notes, trying to project the image of a dedicated employee rather than someone who'd spent the weekend recovering from the most passionate night of her life. The room fell silent as the door opened. A figure entered with the kind of confidence that commanded attention without effort. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that fit like it was designed specifically for his body. Dark hair, piercing eyes, and a presence that made the air itself seem to crackle with energy. Celeste's pen clattered to the floor. It was him. The man from the hotel. The stranger who'd made her forget her own name with his touch. The one night. Stan she'd sworn to forget was standing at the front of the room, scanning the crowd with those same intense eyes that had undressed her soul 3 nights ago. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "I'm Damian Cross, your new CEO." The recognition. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Celeste felt the world tilt on its axis. Damian's expression didn't change. He was the picture of professional composure, but she caught the slight tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible pause in his introduction. He remembered her. Of course he remembered her. Celeste wanted to sink through the floor, to disappear into the building's foundation, and emerge somewhere in China. Instead, she sat frozen, watching as Damian outlined his vision for the company with the same commanding presence that had drawn her to him. "On the dance floor, I believe in pushing boundaries," he was saying, his gaze occasionally flickering to her section of the room, "in taking risks that others might consider inadvisable. Sometimes the most unexpected partnerships yield the most extraordinary results." Was he talking about business, or was there a double meaning in his words? Celeste couldn't tell, and that terrified her. The direct challenge. After what felt like an eternity, the meeting began to wind down. Employees started shuffling papers and checking phones, ready to return to their desks. Celeste had almost made it to the door when his voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Miss Rivera." She froze, every head in the room turning to look at her. Jessica's eyes widened in shock, and Celeste could practically feel the curiosity radiating from her colleagues. "Yes, sir?" she managed, her voice surprisingly steady despite the fact that her heart was performing gymnastics in her chest. "I'd like to see the Henderson campaign proposal on my desk by tomorrow morning," Damian said, his tone perfectly professional. "I hear you have creative instincts that might serve us well." The emphasis on creative instincts made her cheeks burn. "Of course, Mr. Cross, I'll have it ready." He nodded once, a gesture so formal it almost made her doubt that she'd ever seen him smile. Almost. As the room emptied, Celeste remained rooted to her spot, watching as Damian gathered his papers with the same methodical precision he'd used to drive her wild with wanting. When he looked up one final time, their eyes locked, and she saw something flicker in his expression, a heat that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with unfinished business. Then he was gone, leaving her standing alone with the dawning realization that her fresh start had just become infinitely more complicated. "Celeste," Jessica whispered, appearing at her elbow. "Please tell me you didn't sleep with our new CEO." Celeste closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her mistake, or was it fate, settling around her shoulders like Damien's shirt had that morning. "I can't tell you that," she whispered back, "because that would be a lie." The next morning, Celeste arrived at Sterling Dynamics 30 minutes early, armed with extra coffee and a determination to prove she was more than just a weekend mistake. She'd spent the entire night crafting the Henderson campaign proposal, pouring every ounce of her creativity into layouts that would make Damien Cross see her as the brilliant marketing coordinator she truly was, not the reckless woman who'd left cryptic notes in hotel rooms. Her desk had become a war zone of sketches, color samples, and crumpled coffee cups. Jessica found her there at 7:30, looking like she'd been wrestling with inspiration all night. "Celeste, you look terrible," Jessica said, settling into her own workspace with a concerned frown. "Did you sleep at all?" "Sleep is overrated," Celeste muttered, making final adjustments to her presentation boards. "I need this proposal to be perfect. Better than perfect. I need it to be so brilliant that Damien Mr. Cross forgets all about everything else." Jessica leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Honey, you can't just pretend nothing happened. The man is your boss now. You're going to have to deal with this eventually." Before Celeste could respond, her computer chimed with an email notification. The subject line made her stomach drop. "Meeting schedule change. D. Cross." She opened it with trembling fingers. "Ms. Rivera, please report to my office at 9 a.m. sharp to discuss the Henderson proposal. Come prepared to defend your creative choices." "D. Cross, defend my creative choices?" Celeste read aloud. "What kind of corporate torture is this?" The Lion's Den at exactly 9 o'clock, Celeste stood outside Damien's corner office, her presentation materials clutched against her chest like armor. Through the glass walls, she could see him seated behind an imposing mahogany desk, his attention focused on whatever document he was reading. He looked every inch the powerful CEO, commanding, untouchable, and devastatingly attractive in a way that made her remember exactly why she'd lost her mind 3 nights ago. She knocked softly, and his voice called out, "Enter." The office was a study in controlled luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, modern art pieces that probably cost more than her annual salary, and furniture that screamed success. But it was the man behind the desk who commanded all her attention. "Ms. Rivera," Damien said without looking up from his papers. "You're punctual. I appreciate that in an employee." The word employee hit like a calculated slap, reminding her exactly where she stood in his world now. "Thank you, sir. I have the Henderson proposal ready for your review." "Excellent." He finally looked up, and the impact of his full attention nearly knocked her off balance. "Please, have a seat." Celeste arranged her materials on the small conference table in the corner of his office, hyper-aware of every movement under his scrutinizing gaze. She launched into her presentation with professional precision, explaining her concept for Henderson's new product launch, a campaign built around authentic emotional connections rather than flashy gimmicks. "The target demographic responds to genuine storytelling," she explained, pointing to her mood boards. "They want to feel understood, not sold to. My approach focuses on creating moments of recognition, those instances where customers see themselves reflected in the brand's narrative." Damien listened in silence, occasionally making notes, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin feel too tight. "Interesting," he said finally. "Tell me, Ms. Rivera, what inspired this particular approach, this focus on authentic connections?" The question felt loaded, dangerous. "I believe the best marketing comes from understanding human nature, sir. People crave genuine connection in an increasingly artificial world." A slow smile curved his lips. the first genuine expression she'd seen from him since that night. "And you consider yourself an expert on human connection?" Heat flooded her cheeks. "I think everyone is searching for something real, Mr. Cross. Sometimes we find it in the most unexpected places." The air between them crackled with unspoken meaning. Damien stood and moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Your proposal is adequate," he said, his tone deliberately neutral. "But I think you can do better. I want you to revise it. Focus more on the emotional impact. I want Henderson's customers to feel something they've never felt before." Celeste blinked. "The emotional impact is already the core of the campaign, sir." He turned to face her, and something flickered in his eyes. Challenge, amusement, heat. "Is it? Because looking at these boards, I see safety. I see a marketing coordinator playing it safe when she should be taking risks. Where's the passion, Ms. Rivera? Where's the fire?" The dangerous. Dance over. The following weeks, Damien seemed to take perverse pleasure in making Celeste's professional life a beautiful nightmare. Every assignment came with impossible deadlines and cryptic feedback designed to push her beyond her comfort zone. He'd appear at her desk with new projects, standing just close enough that she could smell his cologne, his presence a constant reminder of what had passed between them. "Ms. Rivera," he'd say, placing a file on her desk with deliberate care, "I need a complete brand overhaul for Morrison Industries by Friday. Think you can handle something that intense?" The double meanings in his words were becoming impossible to ignore, and Celeste found herself caught between frustration and a traitorous excitement that made her pulse race every time he was near. Jessica watched their interactions with growing concern and fascination. "He's either trying to drive you crazy or seduce you," she observed one afternoon as they grabbed lunch in the company cafeteria. "Possibly both." "He's just a demanding boss," Celeste insisted, though even she didn't believe it anymore. "Some executives are like that. They push their employees to excel." "Honey, I've worked for demanding bosses. This isn't that." Jessica leaned forward, lowering her voice. "The man looks at you like he wants to devour you. And you light up like a Christmas tree every time he's around, even when you're complaining about him." Celeste wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Every interaction with Damien left her feeling electric, alive in a way she'd never experienced before. Even his criticism felt like foreplay, each challenge he threw at her making her want to prove herself worthy of his attention. The breaking point. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when most of the office had emptied out. Celeste was working late again, hunched over her computer trying to perfect the latest iteration of the Henderson campaign. She'd revised it 4 times based on Damien's increasingly specific feedback, each version pushing her further into territory that felt more personal than professional. "Working late again, Ms. Rivera?" His voice from directly behind her made her jump. She turned to find Damien standing by her desk, his suit jacket removed, tie loosened, looking more human than she'd seen him since that first morning in the conference room. "Just finishing the Henderson revisions," she said, trying to ignore the way her heart rate spiked at his proximity. "You wanted more emotional depth, so I've restructured the entire narrative arc around moments of vulnerability and connection." Damien moved around to look at her screen, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Show me." Celeste walked him through the revised campaign, acutely aware of his presence beside her. When she reached the final slide, a tagline about finding unexpected love in a disconnected world, he was quiet for a long moment. "This," he said softly, "is what I've been waiting for." She looked up at him, confusion and something deeper warring in her chest. "Sir?" "Stop calling me Sir, Celeste." Her name on his lips sent shivers down her spine. "We both know this game. We're playing has nothing to do with marketing campaigns." The air between them suddenly felt charged, dangerous. "I don't know what you mean." Damien's laugh was low, intimate. "Don't you?" 3 weeks of impossible deadlines, of me finding excuses to be near your desk, of you rising to every challenge I throw at you with that fire in your eyes. This isn't about work, and we both know it. Celeste stood abruptly, putting distance between them, but found herself trapped between her desk and his imposing presence. This is completely inappropriate. You're my boss. Yes, he agreed, stepping closer. I am. And that should make this simple. We should both walk away, pretend that night never happened, maintain our professional boundaries. Exactly, she whispered, though her body was betraying her, swaying toward him like a flower seeking sunlight. But here's the problem, Celeste, Damien continued, his voice dropping to that same whiskey-smooth tone that had seduced her on the dance floor. I can't stop thinking about you. About the way you laughed when you taught me to salsa. About the way you felt in my arms. About the way you whispered my name in the dark. Her breath caught. You remember that night? His smile was equal parts tender and predatory. Every second of it, do you? Celeste felt the walls she'd built around that night crumbling like sandcastles in a tide. Under Damien's intense gaze, fragments began falling into place with startling clarity. The conference? She whispered, her eyes widening. 2 years ago, in Chicago. You were in the audience when I presented the emotional storytelling campaign for Reynolds Corp. Damien's smile deepened. You wore a red dress that made you look like fire itself. You talked about marketing as a form of human connection, about reaching people's hearts instead of just their wallets. The entire room was mesmerized. More memories surfaced, catching glimpses of an incredibly handsome man in the back row, feeling his eyes on her during her presentation, the way he'd applauded longer than anyone else. You tried to approach me afterward, but I was rushing to catch a flight. I was building up the courage for 3 hours, Damien admitted, moving closer until only inches separated them. By the time I reached the lobby, you were already in a taxi. I spent the next 2 years wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to speak up sooner. Celeste's mind reeled. So Friday night wasn't coincidence. I recognized you the moment you walked into that bar. I'd been following your career, waiting for the right opportunity to cross paths again. When I heard you were leaving Morrison and Associates, I made sure Sterling Dynamics made you an offer you couldn't refuse. The revelation should have angered. Her should have felt like manipulation. Instead, it sent heat spiraling through her entire body. You orchestrated all of this? Not all of it, Damien said, reaching up to trace her jawline with gentle fingers. I orchestrated the job opportunity. Everything else, the chemistry, the connection, the way you make me lose control, that's been real from the very beginning. The yebya-ib confession, lose control? Celeste challenged, even as she leaned into his touch. You've been the picture of corporate composure, cold, demanding, impossible to read. Damien's laugh was rough around the edges. Cold? Celeste, I've been barely holding myself together. Do you think I normally micromanage my marketing coordinators? Do you think I usually find excuses to be near their desks, to assign them projects that require extended one-on-one meetings? She thought about the past 3 weeks, his constant presence, the way his eyes tracked her movements, the increasingly personal nature of his feedback. The impossible deadlines? Were my pathetic attempts to keep you close without crossing lines I had no business wanting to cross. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, making her breath hitch. I told myself I was being professional, but the truth is, I've been going insane watching you work, seeing you pour that passion into campaigns when all I wanted was for you to look at me the way you did that night. Damien, she whispered, his name a prayer and a plea. I know this is complicated, he continued, his forehead resting against hers. I know I'm your boss, and there are protocols and policies and 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I also know that what happened between us wasn't just physical, it was life-changing, Celeste finished, the admission torn from somewhere deep in her chest. I've been trying to forget, trying to convince myself it was just a drunken mistake. But I can't stop thinking about you either. The point of no return. The confession hung between them like a bridge that, once crossed, would change everything. Celeste could feel herself standing at the edge of a precipice, knowing that her next choice would determine not just her career, but the entire trajectory of her life. This could destroy everything, she said, even as her hands found their way to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath expensive fabric. It could, Damien agreed, his arms encircling her waist with familiar possession. Or it could be the beginning of something extraordinary, something worth the risk. Before she could overthink it, before rational thought could intervene, Celeste rose on her toes and kissed him. It was different from that first night. Less desperate, more intentional, but no less incendiary. 3 weeks of tension, of professional distance and carefully maintained boundaries, exploded into passion that made their first encounter seem tame by comparison. Damien responded instantly, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pressed, her closer against him. He kissed her like a man starving, like someone who'd been holding back for so long that restraint was no longer possible. God, Celeste, he murmured against her lips. I've wanted this every single day since I walked into that conference room and saw you sitting there trying to pretend you didn't remember me. She pulled back slightly, searching his face. I did remember pieces. Your laugh, the way you touched me, the feeling of being completely seen. But I convinced myself it was just a dream. It was real, he assured her, his thumb tracing patterns on her cheek. The most real thing that's ever happened to me. The new reality. They talked through the night, sharing stories and secrets that transformed them from boss and employee into something much more complex. Damien told her about taking over Sterling Dynamics from his father, about the pressure to prove himself worthy of the legacy, about how her presentation 2 years ago had inspired him to pursue more authentic marketing approaches. Celeste opened up about her failed engagement to her college boyfriend, about the fear that had made her run from connections ever since, about how that night with him had awakened something she'd thought was lost forever. What happens now? She asked as dawn painted the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. They were curled together on the leather couch in his office, her head on his chest, his fingers playing with her hair. Now, Damien said, pressing a kiss, to the top of her head, we figure it out together. There will be challenges, corporate policies, office gossip, the complexity of mixing business with pleasure. But I've spent 2 years regretting not taking a chance on something extraordinary. I won't make that mistake again. Celeste tilted her head to look at him, seeing not the intimidating CEO, but the man who danced with her like they were the only 2 people in the world. The Henderson campaign? Was brilliant from the very first draft, he admitted with a sheepish grin. I just couldn't bring myself to let you stop visiting my office. She laughed, the sound bright and free. You're impossible. I'm in love, he corrected, the words simple and devastating in their honesty. Celeste felt her heart skip, then settle into a new rhythm, one that matched his perfectly. Good, she said, reaching up to kiss him again. Because so am I. The happy beginning, 6 months later, Celeste Rivera Cross stood in front of the same Sterling Dynamics building, but everything had changed. The Henderson campaign had won 3 industry awards, cementing her reputation as one of the most innovative marketing minds in the business. More importantly, she was no longer running from connection. She was embracing it with both hands. Damien emerged from the building, looking every inch the successful CEO, but with eyes that lit up when they found her. Ready for lunch, Mrs. Cross? She grinned, still getting used to her new name. Always, though I think Jessica is still traumatized by our engagement announcement. She'll recover, Damien said, pulling her into his arms right there on the busy sidewalk. Besides, she's too busy planning your bachelorette party to hold grudges. As they walked hand in hand through the city, Celeste reflected on the strange turns life could take. What had started as a wild night and a mortifying morning had become the greatest love story she could have imagined. Messy, complicated, passionate, and absolutely perfect. Sometimes the best things in life came from the risks you never planned to take, from the connections you never saw coming, and from having the courage to rewrite your own story when fate offered you a second chance. And sometimes, just sometimes, the man you thought was a one-night mistake turned out to be the love of your lifetime.